Some betrayal stories begin with a fight, others with a suspicious message. But there are those that hurt even more cowardly, when everything suddenly disappears, as if nothing had ever happened. And this is exactly the kind of betrayal you'll learn about now, a betrayal without explanation, a sudden disappearance. A man who deleted all the photos of the couple, all the memories, and simply vanished. Without a word, without a trace, as if she, the woman who dedicated years of her life to him, had never existed. Have you ever been through something like this? Have you ever felt the pain of emotional abandonment without warning? Have you ever woken up one day and discovered that the person who claimed to love you has deleted you from their life like someone deleting a file? This true story is a female outburst about ghosting in a relationship. About a betrayed and disillusioned woman who tried, with all the love in the world, to build a future alongside someone who didn't even have the courage to say goodbye. Her name is Sarah, and she believed she had found a soulmate, a kind, present, attentive man too. Much so, sometimes, those first few months were magical. They felt like a movie script. Unexpected gifts, loving good morning messages, plans for the future. Soon, she felt like part of his family. He introduced her as the love of his life, naive and dreamy. She believed him, but what she didn't know, and what many women don't realize, is that there are signs, small warning signs, uncomfortable glances, subtle changes in behavior. People who disappear for a few hours and then return as if nothing had happened. Unanswered messages, strange posts, and of course, that silent feeling that something is wrong, but which we try to ignore to avoid appearing paranoid. In Sarah's case, it all started with his sudden withdrawal. He, who had been so present, began responding with a coldness that hurt more than silence. He stopped liking her photos on social media. He stopped posting the two of them together. And then, one day, out of the blue, he deleted everything. All the photos, all the videos, all the records. As if the love she swore was true had been nothing more than a delusion. Sarah went on his social media and saw no sign of her, no sign of them, just him, alone, smiling, as if he were a new man, a man with no past, no history with her. Her heart pounded, a chill ran down her spine, a mixture of anger and despair. What did it mean? A mistake? A bug? A coincidence? No, it was intentional, premeditated, planned, and she knew it, because no one deletes everything by mistake. No one disappears like that, ... Without hiding something very serious, she tried calling, nothing. She texted, no answer. She went to his work, he was gone. He'd quit weeks before. And she had no idea, she knew nothing. It was as if he'd planned to disappear, as if he were living another life. Away from her, ... Maybe with someone else. From that day on, Sarah began to spiral into a deep pain. Abandonment, insecurity, anger, guilt. She turned everything over, searching every corner of her memory, trying to understand where she went wrong. If she went wrong, and why. This story is about that, about a partner's disappearance that makes no sense, about the signs of betrayal we don't want to see, and about a woman's strength in rebuilding her identity after being erased from the life of the one she loved most. Get ready to follow Sarah's diary-like accounts, filled with intense confessions, dilemmas, and difficult decisions. You'll be moved, outraged, and perhaps even recognize yourself in some parts. Because what she experienced wasn't just an unexpected breakup. It was a psychological betrayal, a cowardly disappearance, a profound heartbreak, and she's going to tell everything, in detail, without censorship, with pain, with truth, and with the courage of someone who no longer wants to be silenced. She doesn't want revenge, she wants to understand. And, above all, she wants to warn other women. Because when a man erases everything, it's because he has a lot to hide. What about you? Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever loved someone who simply disappeared, without giving any explanation? Have you ever felt the pain of seeing all your memories being erased, as if they were unimportant? So tell us in the comments. Your story might help others see the truth. Comment below what you would do in Sarah H's place. If you want to hear her full story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because this story is just beginning, and it will touch you deeply.
Hey, my name is Sarah. I'm here to tell you, honestly, everything I've experienced these past few months, or rather, everything I'm experiencing, because the wound is still open, the silence still screams at me, and its absence still suffocates me. I never imagined I'd have to talk about pain like this. A pain that's not just a breakup, but a brutal disappearance, an erasure of our history. He deleted all our photos, all of them, as if he'd swept what we were under the rug, trying to hide forever that we'd once existed together. And then he simply disappeared, without explanation, without warning, without a goodbye. And I was left here, lost, trying to understand where I went wrong, trying to understand who he really was. I've always believed in true love, that feeling that transforms, embraces, and heals. When I met him, I gave myself completely, without fear, without reservations. It was a shock to find someone who seemed to understand me, who seemed to truly want to build something with me. The first few months were like a dream. I felt alive, happy, loved. He was kind, attentive, always concerned. He made me believe I was unique, special. It was as if the world had finally aligned for us. But little by little, I began to notice small changes. Nothing blatant, nothing obvious. Just subtleties that I initially tried to ignore. He began to withdraw, becoming quieter, less present. The messages decreased, the conversations lost their spark. I found myself waiting to hear from him, checking my phone, wondering if something was wrong. But he always said it was just fatigue, work, stress. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. This blind trust blinded me to the signs. Signs that I see so clearly today, but that at the time I refused to see. Perhaps out of fear of the truth, perhaps out of hope. But everything began to fall apart the day he, for no apparent reason, deleted all our photos from social media. It was as if he had decided to erase not just the images, but our history, our lives. As if it were possible to erase years of affection, moments, and plans with a simple click. I panicked. I called him, texted him, asked what was going on, but all I got was silence. That silence that hurts more than any bitter words. He disappeared, and with him, he took everything good between us. I kept trying to understand what was happening. Had he found someone else? Was all that dedication a lie? Or had he never really cared? The question swirled in my head like a tornado that wouldn't let me breathe. I tried not to despair, but anguish tightened my chest. Nights turned into sleepless days, days filled with memories that brought silent tears to my eyes. That's when I began to realize that the greatest pain wasn't just his disappearance, but the feeling of having been erased from his life, as if I hadn't existed, as if all the love I'd given him had been a mistake. And this feeling is cruel, because it affects our identity, our self-esteem, our perception of who we are and what we deserve. I found myself alone amidst this emptiness, trying to pick up the pieces of my heart. And even in the face of pain, I learned not to blame myself, to understand that sometimes the blame lies not with the one who loves, but with the one who decides to leave without looking back. Today, I still feel the weight of that absence, the longing that won't go away, the doubts that insist on lingering. But I also feel a strength growing within me, the strength that comes from overcoming, from learning, from the desire to find myself again. I know this story isn't over yet, that many pages lie ahead, and I want to share each one with you so you know you're not alone, that it's possible to move forward even when it seems impossible. I invite you to follow this outburst, to be moved, to be revolted, and Who knows to find the courage to face your own wounds? From the moment he deleted all our photos, something inside me that had previously been calm began to stir in a way I'd never felt before. It was a mixture of disbelief, anger, profound sadness, and a seemingly endless anguish. I tried to rationalize it all, but it was impossible to understand such a sudden, cruel, and unexplained disappearance. I relived every moment we spent together, trying to find some clue, some sign I'd missed, some clue that would justify his decision to simply erase me from his life. I remember every smile, every hug, every late-night conversation, and I wondered, was it all a lie? Had he pretended for so long, only to disappear without a word? My mind was in an endless loop. I began to notice my sleep was getting shorter and shorter, my appetite was gone, and anxiety was taking over my body. It was as if the pain were an invisible, constant weight, preventing me from breathing properly. I couldn't talk to anyone about it because when I tried to explain, people gave me that it will pass look, as if it were something simple, easy to overcome, but it wasn't, not for me. In fact, I don't even know if it ever will be. I also began to question myself. Was I not good enough? Did I do something wrong? Did I miss the signs? Guilt was a shadow that followed me every step of the way, whispering in my ear that I could have avoided all of this if I had been different, better, more attentive. But at the same time, I felt a deep sense of outrage. How could someone simply erase years of history without a conversation, without a final glance? How could someone disappear from the life of the person they claim to love without any explanation? This isn't just betrayal, it's cowardice. It's a kind of abandonment that leaves deep scars on the soul. I began to realize I needed to seek answers. So I started trying to connect with people who had been through similar situations to understand if I was the only one feeling this mix of pain, anger, and confusion. And no, it wasn't just me. Many women and even men have experienced this type of ghosting, this unexplained disappearance that destroys, erases memories, and leaves a void difficult to fill. This search for answers made me realize that the problem wasn't me. The problem was him, with his fears, his flaws, his inability to face his feelings or face the end honestly. He chose to run away. He chose to erase everything because for him it was easier that way. But for me, it wasn't. For me, it was a profound betrayal, a cruel loss, an abandonment that changed everything. I confess there were times when I wanted to give up on everything. I wanted to disappear, forget, erase what was left of that story that once made me smile so much. But then I remembered something very important. My story cannot be erased by anyone. I am more than him, more than that disappearance, more than the pain he caused. And it was at that moment that I began to find myself. I began to understand that the true betrayal wasn't just his, but my own betrayal of myself for having allowed someone to have so much power over my happiness. Now, I'm trying to rebuild my world, my self-esteem, my life. And I know it's going to be a difficult path, full of ups and downs, but it's a path I need to take to free myself from the shadow he left behind. I remember that day clearly, as if it had imprinted every moment of pain and loneliness on my mind. I was sitting in my room, surrounded by an oppressive silence that seemed to scream louder than any words. My phone sat next to me, motionless, without a single notification, without a single sign that it was still thinking of me. The emptiness of the phone reflected the emptiness I felt inside, an almost physical sensation, a black hole that consumed all my strength. Everything seemed to have collapsed at once. His act of deleting all our photos wasn't just an impulsive click on social media. It was a cruel symbol of a love that, for him, no longer existed. It was as if he had decided to erase what we were, All the moments, the plans, the promises, as if we had never existed together. I felt discarded, like a useless object he could simply erase from his life. I spent hours staring at my phone, hoping for a message, an explanation, some clue as to where he was or what he was thinking. But all I received was absolute silence. A deafening silence that made me feel small, invisible. I felt alone, more alone than I ever imagined I could feel. The pain was so intense that it seemed to slowly corrode my soul, leaving a bitter taste and a suffocating weight on my chest. It was in this silence that I began to delve into my own memories, searching for answers within myself. I asked myself incessantly, did I really know him? Was all that happiness we felt together just an illusion? Did he feel any regret or remorse? Or was it all just a chapter he wanted to close as quickly as possible, erasing all evidence? These questions swirled through my mind like a hurricane. My sleep was lost, the nights were long and filled with torturous thoughts. My mind wouldn't let me rest, and the fear of never finding answers turned into constant anxiety. I found myself crying alone, trying to hold back the tears so no one would notice how hurt I was. More than anything, I felt betrayed not only by him, but by myself. Betrayed for having trusted, for having given myself body and soul, for having believed that love was real. Guilt consumed me, a dark shadow that accompanied me at every turn, telling me that maybe I had been foolish, naive, that I should have seen the signs sooner, that maybe I had been wrong. But along with this guilt, a deep anger arose. Anger at him for being so cruel, so cold, for leaving without even looking back, for destroying everything we'd built together with one ruthless gesture. Anger at myself for allowing someone to have so much power over my happiness, for letting my life be destroyed by someone who didn't know how to value what we had. Amidst this whirlwind of emotions, I began seeking support. I spoke to friends, family, and people who loved me and who helped me see that I wasn't alone. I discovered that many other people had also gone through similar situations, feeling the same pain, the same abandonment, the same lack of explanations. This didn't take away the pain, but it gave me some comfort, knowing that I wasn't alone. And it was in this process of seeking support that I began to understand that it wasn't my fault, that he chose to leave, chose to disappear, chose to erase everything because he didn't have the courage to face the truth, because he didn't have enough love to be honest. And that, as much as it hurt, I needed to leave this man behind and start taking care of myself. Today, I still feel the open wounds, the pain of loss and abandonment, but I also feel a strength growing within me, a strength born of overcoming, of resilience, of the will to rebuild myself and be happy again. I know the path will not be easy, that I will still have difficult days, but I am learning to love myself, to value myself, and to not let his absence define who I am. I want you, who are listening to this story, to know that if you're going through something similar, you're not alone, that your pain is real, valid, and that it's possible to find strength even in the most difficult situations. Don't let anyone erase your story. Don't let someone's disappearance destroy your self-esteem and self-worth. I remember as if it were yesterday that deep emptiness that gripped me in the days following his disappearance. His absence wasn't just physical. It was as if a black hole had opened in the middle of my chest and was sucking out everything inside me, my hopes, my dreams, my self-worth. That cold, relentless silence was like a sentence, a cruel punishment I couldn't understand. Waking up was a challenge. What had once been light mornings full of plans now became a huge weight that made me hesitate to get out of bed. The routine, which had once been colorful and lively, felt like a black and white film, meaningless and lifeless. I tried to occupy myself, distract myself with work, friends, household chores, but nothing filled the void he left. Pain seemed a constant presence, a shadow that followed me at every step. My mind became a maze of doubts, regrets, and unanswered questions. I replayed every conversation, every gesture, every smile. I tried to identify signs I might have overlooked, moments when he was distant and I pretended everything was fine. Guilt gnawed at me. Was I not enough? Had I missed something? Was my blind trust a mistake? But along with the guilt, anger boiled inside me. Anger at him for disappearing like that, without explanation, without a single word. Anger that he'd deleted all our photos, as if trying to erase not only the memories, but my very existence. With him, anger that he'd treated me as if I were invisible, as if our love had been a mere whim. I felt betrayed in a way I had never felt before, not just by the abandonment, but by the lack of respect, of consideration. I had given him my heart, my trust, my life, and he simply gave up, erased everything, and left. Amidst this whirlwind of emotions, the loneliness was overwhelming. I cried alone in the silence of the night, trying to hold back the tears so as not to be seen as weak. I didn't want anyone to know how lost and broken I felt, but inside I was shattered, as if I'd been hit by a gigantic wave that knocked the breath out of me. I began to isolate myself. I avoided meetings, phone calls, and messages. I no longer wanted to hear empty words or superficial advice from people who didn't understand what I was going through. I needed time for myself to digest it all, to understand who I was without him. It was at that moment that I realized how much I had lost myself in that relationship. I had left aside my own dreams, my desires, my essence. Everything revolved around him, trying to maintain peace, hoping he would be the man I idealized. And now, without him, I no longer knew who I was. I decided to seek professional help. It was the hardest, but also the most important decision I ever made. Therapy offered me a safe space to shed my tears, to face my fears, to confront my insecurities. Little by little, I began to understand that the pain I felt was legitimate, that my sadness was real, but that I needed to find ways to move forward. Each session was a journey, painful and liberating at the same time. I cried, screamed, and rebelled against that injustice, against that inexplicable abandonment. But I also began to listen to myself, to forgive myself, to love myself again. I learned that my happiness couldn't depend on someone who chose to leave, who didn't deserve me, who didn't know how to appreciate what we had. In the midst of this rebuilding, I began to reclaim parts of myself that I had buried, my hobbies, my independence, my true friendships. I learned to put myself first, to say no when something didn't make sense, to prioritize my well-being. But not everything was easy. There were days when longing overwhelmed me, when I wondered if he would return, if things could be different. Days when anger and sadness mixed in a storm inside me. Days when I thought I would never feel whole again. Still, I kept going. Because I understood that true strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time life knocks us down. Today, I still bear the scars of that story. But I also carry the certainty that I am stronger than any abandonment, that I am capable of rising up and building a new life, full of self-love and hope. If you're experiencing something similar, know that your pain is real, but that overcoming it is possible. That you're not alone, and that you deserve respect, love, and explanations, even if sometimes they never come. I really want to hear your story, your outburst, your struggle. Leave your comment below, share this message, like the video, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue together on this journey of healing and rebirth. The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster I couldn't get off. His absence wasn't simply a physical absence. It was a painful presence that occupied every inch of my mind and heart. I felt as if he had taken away not only himself, but also a part of me, the one that only existed when we were together. Waking up each morning was an exercise in strength, as if the simple act of getting out of bed were a battle against sadness and feelings of abandonment. My thoughts swirled around what I could have done differently, what signs I missed, what was wrong with me. It was an endless cycle of doubt and self-criticism that exhausted me. I tried to hold on to the good memories, the moments when we'd smiled together, when he told me I was special, that we'd be together forever. But at the same time, those memories became sharp knives that cut me inside because they reminded me of what had been lost. The lack of explanation for his disappearance tortured me. I needed to understand. I needed some reason for his sudden abandonment. Without answers, my mind created scenarios, some plausible, some absurd, but all painful. Had he cheated on me? Had he found someone better? Or had he simply given up because he grew tired of me? These questions echoed in the silence of my days and nights. In an attempt to escape this turmoil, I engaged in activities that once brought me pleasure books, music. I even started exercising, but nothing seemed enough to fill the void. Many times I found myself crying alone, unsure how to express the pain that seemed endless. It was during this period that I realized how much I had lost in that relationship. I had placed all my strength and hope in him, and now I needed to learn to find myself again. I sought support in therapy, a safe place where I could pour myself out, where my tears and fears were welcomed. Each session was a discovery, a journey within myself. I confronted my insecurities, my low self-esteem, and the guilt I carried for not realizing what was happening sooner. I learned that the pain was legitimate, but that I had the power to rebuild myself. The process was slow and painful. I had days of intense sadness, of wanting to give up, but also moments of hope, of rediscovery, of small advances. Over time, I began to realize that my happiness couldn't depend on him or anyone else, that I deserved love, respect, and care, especially from myself. Starting over wasn't easy. I had to let go of the past, accept that some stories don't have happy endings, that not all loves last forever. But I also learned that this ending opened up space for me to grow, become stronger, and prepare for a better future. Today, despite the scars, I feel a new strength within me. I know I'll still miss them, that the pain may return at some point, but I also know I'm capable of moving forward, of loving myself, of taking care of myself. The months that passed since he disappeared were a true whirlwind of emotions, a roller coaster I couldn't get off. Each day was a struggle against sadness, against longing, against the ghost that insisted on returning when I least expected it. But they were also days of small victories, of discoveries about myself, of new beginnings I never imagined possible. From the very beginning, the feeling of abandonment overwhelmed me. It was as if an infinite void had settled inside me, a hole that nothing seemed capable of filling. His silence, the lack of explanations, all of it consumed me in an almost physical way. I woke and slept thinking about how life could be so cruel, how someone who claimed to love me could simply erase everything and disappear. Routine became a challenge. Every corner of the house, every object, every place reminded me of him, from the chair he used to sit in to the playlists we'd listened to together. It was a constant torture, reliving everything that now seemed like a distant dream. I tried to keep my mind occupied, throw myself into work, into the activities I enjoyed, but the pain was always there, hidden, ready to explode. The nights were the worst. In the silence of my room, alone, longing overwhelmed me in a way that made me cry until I had no more tears. I wanted to understand the reason for her disappearance. I wanted an answer, a reason, something that would make me believe there was still hope. But all I had was a vast emptiness and a series of unanswered questions. I relived every conversation, every look, every gesture, trying to find signs that something was wrong, trying to understand what I had done to deserve this. Guilt consumed me, making me question my worth, my dignity. It was as if I had failed in something fundamental, as if I had let the love of my life slip away through my own inattention. But along with the guilt, a deep anger grew. Anger at him for leaving without a backward glance, for erasing everything, for treating me as if I were disposable. I felt betrayed not only by the abandonment, but by the indifference, the disregard, with which he handled our relationship. This mix of love, pain, anger, and guilt left me lost. I didn't know if I should wait for him, if I should move on, if I should hold a grudge or try to forgive. It was like being in an emotional whirlwind pulling me in every direction at once. I sought help in therapy, where I began to confront my deepest feelings. There, I discovered that the pain of abandonment was also the pain of having lost myself. In that relationship, I realized I had put his needs above my own, but I had stopped caring for myself to care for something that no longer existed. With each session, I got to know myself better. I learned to recognize my limits, to value my self-love, and to understand that I deserved respect and honesty. Therapy was a slow and painful process, but essential to my recovery. I also began surrounding myself with supportive people, true friends who stood by me, listening to my struggles, and helping me see the strength I didn't know I had. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I deserved to be truly loved, that I could be happy. Again, I started taking care of myself again, doing things that brought me pleasure, reclaiming dreams I'd abandoned. I traveled alone for the first time, signed up for classes, and started exercising. Each small achievement was a victory against sadness and fear, but not everything was easy. There were times when the pain returned with a vengeance, when I wondered if he would ever return, if that love had a future. Days when I felt like giving up, like giving in to despair. But I resisted. I learned that loving myself was the key to moving forward. That true love begins within us, that we need to be our own safe haven before seeking it in someone else. Today, I still carry the scars of that story, but I also carry the certainty that I am capable of rising again, of reinventing myself, of loving in a healthier and truer way. From the day he disappeared without explanation, my life became a seemingly endless whirlwind of emotions. The pain of abandonment was an open wound that bled ceaselessly, a vast emptiness that seemed to swallow everything around me. It was as if he had taken not only himself, but also a part of me that could never be. Recovered, that cruel absence echoed in every corner of my existence, making the days long and the nights even more endless. Waking up became a real challenge. I felt as if each morning was a struggle to accept that the person I loved had simply erased all our memories, all records of our love, without a reason, without a single word. The house, which had once been a home, a place where I found peace and security, now became a silent, cold landscape where the echo of the past haunted me. Every object, every corner, every photo that remained was a painful reminder of what we had built, which suddenly seemed to have crumbled completely. The memories that once brought me joy now cut me like sharp knives, making me relive a film I wanted to forget, but which insisted on playing endlessly in my mind. At night, loneliness enveloped me with a crushing force. I found myself crying silently, hiding my tears so as not to appear weak in front of anyone. The weight of his absence suffocated me, made me question my own existence, my ability to love and be loved. I wondered if I had done something wrong, if I had not been enough, if I could have prevented that abrupt end. The lack of answers consumed me inside. His silence was like a sentence, a condemnation without judgment, leaving me trapped in a limbo of uncertainty and doubt. I needed to understand. I needed an explanation, a word that would comfort me and give me some meaning to all of this. But all I had was emptiness and silence. Yet, in the midst of that emotional storm, a small but persistent flame began to glow within me. It was a desire to rise again, to not let that pain destroy me completely. I decided I needed to seek help, but I couldn't continue to drown in that sea of sadness alone. Therapy was a crucial step. There, I was able to open my heart without fear of judgment, confront my deepest fears, and understand that the pain I felt was real and legitimate, but that it didn't have to define me. I learned that the loss of that relationship didn't mean the end of my story, that I still had much to live and achieve. The rebuilding process was slow and painful. I faced days when sadness overwhelmed me, when the urge to give up was almost irresistible. But I also had moments of clarity and hope, when I realized that each tear I shed was a small victory, proof that I was healing. I began to rediscover myself, to find strength where I thought it no longer existed. I relearned how to take care of myself, to value my own company, to allow myself to feel joy and hope again. I started dreaming again, planning again, believing that I deserve a love that is true and reciprocal. I learned that self-love isn't selfish, but a vital necessity for our emotional survival, that we need to love and respect ourselves so we can receive the same in return. That happiness doesn't depend on the presence or absence of another person, but on our ability to accept and value ourselves. Today, despite the scars, I feel stronger, more aware, and more prepared for whatever comes. I know the pain may return. The memories may hurt, but I also know I can face them and move forward with courage and determination. If you're going through a similar situation, know that you're not alone. Your pain is real, but overcoming it is possible. You deserve to be happy, to start with yourself, and to build a full life with love, respect, and peace. Over the past few months, as the storm of emotions slowly subsided, I began to realize how deep and complex my healing journey was. The pain of abandonment, the hurt of having our memories erased without explanation, all of this was just the surface of what I needed to truly understand in order to move forward. I discovered that the real challenge wasn't just getting over his disappearance, but reclaiming who I was before all this began, and learning to love myself amidst the open wounds. Before everything happened, I always defined myself by the relationship we had. I believed that happiness depended on his presence, that love was a constant exchange of presence and attention. So when he simply disappeared, he took with him not only my partner, but also my own emotional security. I felt like a boat adrift, rudderless, anchorless, floating between sadness and confusion. It was as if the ground had opened up beneath my feet, and I was falling into a dark abyss, unsure if I would find a way out. Therapy became an essential refuge. There, I was able to explore every layer of my pain, every consuming thought, every paralyzing fear. I learned that the healing process isn't a straight line, but a winding path, full of ups and downs. On many days, I felt I had made progress, ready to let go of the past, but on others, longing and resentment returned with overwhelming force, shattering my resolve. One aspect that had a profound impact on me was the discovery of so-called emotional triggers. These are moments or situations that trigger memories of what I experienced with him, a song, a place, a word, or even a smell. These triggers would appear suddenly, bringing with them a whirlwind of emotions that sometimes made me think I would never overcome that pain. However, over time, I learned to deal with them, recognizing that they were just memories, fragments of a story that, despite being painful, is now in the past. Forgiveness, something that seemed impossible at first, became an important step in my recovery. Not the forgiveness that justifies or accepts what he did, but the forgiveness that frees me from the weight of anger and resentment. I understood that carrying resentment only prolonged my pain and prevented me from moving forward. Forgiving wasn't forgetting, it was choosing my peace over suffering. Furthermore, I regained my faith, not a blind faith in something external, but a faith in myself, in life, and in the future I can still build. I began to believe that that abrupt end, that silent betrayal, were necessary for me to grow, to become stronger and more aware of what I deserve in a relationship. My support network was also crucial on this journey. True friends, family members who never abandoned me, and even people I met on social media, sharing their stories of overcoming adversity, gave me strength in times when I felt most vulnerable. Knowing I wasn't alone, that others had also experienced similar pain brought me comfort and hope. Writing became my faithful ally. Putting my feelings, anxieties, and discoveries on paper was a way to understand myself better, organize my thoughts, and, above all, transform pain into learning. My personal journal became a sacred space where I could be completely honest with myself without masks or fear of judgment. In the midst of this transformation, I allowed myself to dream again. I planned trips, courses, and changes in my personal and professional life. I saw that the world still had much to offer me and that I had much to give, regardless of what happened. Each small step toward these dreams was a victory against the past that tried to hold me back. I know the road is still long and that new challenges may arise, but today I feel more prepared to face them. I've learned that true strength lies in vulnerability and the courage to feel, to cry, but also to get up and move on. I've learned that loving myself is the foundation for any true love I'll ever experience. I never imagined I'd say this one day, but I've started to feel something very close to gratitude for everything I've experienced. Not for the pain, not for the way I was left, not for his absence, but for the woman I've become because of it. It's strange to think that the same man who destroyed me also pushed me, even without knowing it, toward the most important encounter of my life, the encounter with myself. This transformation was neither simple nor quick. I still vividly remember the days when I just wanted to lie still, waiting for time to wash away this seemingly endless suffering. My eyes burned from crying so much, my head heavy with so many confusing thoughts, my heart aching with a longing that no longer made sense. And yet, within all this chaos, there was a silent desire, a spark to rebuild my life, to rebuild myself. Little by little, I stopped looking for answers where there weren't any. I began to accept that I might never understand why he did what he did, and that even if he returned with a convincing explanation, nothing would justify his abandonment, the deletion of our photos, the cruel silence he chose as a way to end a story that, until recently, seemed to be one of love. The truth is, his disappearance forced me to face everything I've been avoiding for years. It showed me how much I'd sacrificed myself within a relationship to maintain a semblance of stability. I'd say yes when I wanted to say no. I'd smile when I wanted to cry. I'd accept emotional scraps because I believed that was what love required, sacrifice. But true love never demands abandonment. I rediscovered my passions, my dreams, my individuality. I started writing again, as I do now every day. I write to remember who I am. I write so I don't forget that I exist beyond any relationship, beyond any pain. I write to transform wounds into words and words into healing. My self-esteem, which previously depended so heavily on his gaze and actions, is now strengthened within me. It's not a magical process. I still have days when I look in the mirror and doubt myself, but I've learned to accept myself, to treat myself with kindness, to care for myself as I always cared for him, and this has been liberating. I've started allowing myself new perspectives, new connections. Not that I'm ready for a new love, maybe not yet, but I'm ready to be unafraid, to look someone in the eye and tell them what I want, what I expect, what I deserve, without begging for love, without begging for attention, without forgetting myself. I had to relearn how to trust, not just others, but especially myself. My intuition, my ability to sense when something isn't right. Because yes, the signs were there. He had been slowly pulling away, avoiding deep conversations, no longer showing the same affection. But I refused to see it. I clung to every small gesture of affection as if it were proof that everything was okay. And now I look back and forgive myself, because loving isn't wrong. What's wrong is losing yourself and the other person to the point where you can no longer see yourself. Today, I recognize the value of an honest conversation, of a dignified farewell, of an ending that, however painful, doesn't strip us of our dignity. He didn't have that courage. He didn't have that maturity. And this isn't about me. It's about him. And understanding this was what liberated me the most. Sometimes I still wonder if he feels remorse, if he regrets it, if when he sees one of our old photos, he feels a tightness in his chest. If some song brings him back to that Sunday we cuddled on the couch, planning the future. But even if he remembers, even if he feels it, it doesn't matter anymore. Because what I built on my own after him is far more valuable than any explanation he could give me. If I could go back in time, I would have listened to myself more. I would have respected the signals from my own body, my soul, more. The emotional exhaustion, the feeling of always walking on eggshells, the fear of losing him just for speaking my mind, all of this was my heart screaming at me. And now, finally, I'm listening. Today, I am my priority. My projects, my dreams, my mental health. And yes, also my heart, which now no longer waits for anyone to be complete. It is whole. I am whole. And that is more than I could ever wish. For the day he simply disappeared from my life, deleting all our photos, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I had not only lost the man I loved, but also the living proof of our love, those memories captured in images. Moments frozen in time, which he destroyed with a cold gesture, as if erasing every trace of our history. It was as if I had been erased along with those photos. The first few days were a whirlwind of intense and contradictory emotions. Disbelief gripped me. Why? Why would he do this to me? Why disappear without explanation? I desperately searched for answers, but his silence was a suffocating void that only deepened my pain. I felt betrayed not only by his disappearance, but by the cruel and silent way he abandoned me, as if I were a disposable chapter in his life. I felt the deepest loneliness I had ever experienced. The days became endless, and the nights became long vigils of silent tears. I spent hours staring at my phone, waiting for some message, some sign that he still cared. But nothing came, only the echo of silence and the certainty that I was alone. Every little detail of the house, every place we frequented together, became a cruel reminder of his absence. The room felt like an altar of sad memories. The songs that once soothed our moments now drew painful sighs from me. The deleted messages and erased photos crushed me inside as if there was no more room for my happiness. But as time passed, that seemingly unbearable pain began to transform. I began to understand that his escape wasn't my fault, that the problem wasn't my worth, but his inability to face the truth. I understood that it wasn't my place to wait for explanations that would never come, that my life needed to go on. Then Suddenly, after months of silence, he reappeared. A cold, curt message. "Hi, hope you're okay. We need to talk." My heart raced, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The urge to respond was overwhelming, but I no longer wanted to lose myself. To him, I no longer wanted to feel the pain of rejection, the weight of uncertainty. I took a deep breath, counted to 10, and prepared myself for what was to come. I decided to respond, no longer as the wounded woman he left behind, but as someone who had learned to value herself. "You chose to disappear. I chose to stay. There's nothing more to say." After that, I blocked him from all sides. It was an act of courage, a turning point. For the first time, I felt free to move on with my life without looking back. Today, I sleep peacefully, not because I've forgotten or stopped loving, but because I've learned to respect my own scars and value my self-love. I know I'm more than a faded story, more than a deleted photo. I'm whole, I'm strong, I'm my priority. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself not to lose myself in someone who didn't know how to fight for me, not to accept less than I deserve, to listen to my heart before it breaks. For those of you experiencing this pain, I want to say that you are not alone. Overcoming it is possible. Self-love is a path to healing. Share your story, write in the comments, like, and subscribe to follow more real stories that touch the soul. Never settle for less than you deserve. Your story deserves to be lived with love, dignity, and respect.